Good morning. I'm going to try and be quick so we can go for lunch because I'm hungry. For those who don't know me, I'm Graham and I am a systems engineer at Airbnb. You may know me from these potentially / probably deprecated tools by now. Imager, definitely gone. Crypt, maybe gone. And as Matt alluded to, I have recently left one terrible place for another. We have horribly racist politicians too. All right. And it failed. Again. Oh, right. What am I supposed to? Which one? That one.
Get on with it! Yes! Get on with it!
You're new a bit beforehand anyway. All right. Second time I used that video, second time it didn't work. One day I'll learn. All right, so before we get started, I think we need to take a look at how things used to be at Airbnb. So the IT organization was a bit of a shambles. It was underfunded, understaffed. They used Casper. That was originally installed by network engineers, and it continues to be supported by contractors, so no one was really invested in it. Things were pretty terrible. But they finally hired someone to manage this stuff. His interests included drinking blue milk, shooting womp rats in his T16, finding out his father's killer was actually his father, and to be honest, he was having a really bad time too. There was loads of legacy code in our JSS. There were plenty of things being performed with a script that should probably be done with a profile. For example, there was this script which ran on the clients, generated the Wi-Fi profile, and then installed it locally. They had an MDM. I don't know what's going on. And there was obviously a lot of code in the JSS which wasn't written specifically for Airbnb. And the tool we were using absolutely sucked at managing software. It was painful for us, and it was an even worse experience for our users. So basically, no software was ever updated. And we were promised patch management for a while, years, and it's still not here. Sorry. And because the product we were using made us copy and paste any code we wanted to run into a web page, we couldn't actually be sure that what we were running on our machines was actually what we had in GitHub. So overall, our processes were really manual. If you ever made a change to the config on the endpoints, you need to document it manually, which meant it probably never happened. If you wanted to deploy a software update, you would need to create a policy that looked for a smart group that was based off an extension attribute that you probably had to write yourself every single time. So overall, a lot of time was being spent repeating exactly the same steps. Our lives are pretty difficult already. We don't need more busy work. So things weren't great, but it wasn't all bad. We eventually got a new manager, and we finally got a real budget. We hired our second person, who was focused on endpoint engineering, and then Brett and Sam started to stop the pain. So Munki was an easy win. It was relatively easy to set up. It's the most user-facing part of our management toolset. So it's a good way of winning back the trust of our users that we'd lost. At this point, they also try not to add any more config to the old tool. So even though Munki isn't a config management tool, it's a lot easier to get things done in an idempotent-like way than with our old tool. We took the opportunity to brand Munki using some of our default wallpapers, added in links to things like our help desks, Keynote templates, company store where you buy t-shirts and stuff. We want this to become the hub of their IT experience. And as they had decided not to make any further changes to Casper, wherever possible, it meant a lot of our config just moved naturally over to Munki. So it was a great time to go back and make sure that all this code that they found in the JSS actually still worked. Here's a hint, it didn't. And as I mentioned before, due to the nature of our old product, we couldn't be sure that the code running on the endpoints was actually what we had in GitHub. Munki is completely configured with text files, as I'm sure a lot of people in here know, which means they're well suited to being kept in Git. We could easily deploy the master branch straight to our Munki servers, straight off Git. With us deploying our code directly from Git, it allowed us to implement procedures to have the code reviewed and be sure that the code we're reviewing is actually what we're running on our endpoints. And it allowed for real collaboration. The Git workflow allows you to test your work on separate branches, even deploy those branches to test servers if you want to. And once you've finished your work, you just merge it into master. There's no need to redo all the work you've just done on your test.js. But it wasn't a perfect transition. The biggest mistake that was made was that they're so preoccupied with switching everything over. They forgot to keep our biggest cheerleaders in the loop. Our support organization was not taken on as full partners at all. We found support using legacy Jamf policy commands and wondering why they weren't doing anything. And they had no idea how to troubleshoot Munki. It was this big mystery black box. They didn't know what they were doing with it. So they were justifiably frustrated. And we also started to update all this software that hadn't been updated for years. Our users had got used to IT not really doing anything. So some teams had hard dependencies on versions of software. So whole workflows were broken by this. So overall, we just needed to do better on this thing. We weren't talking to anyone. We were doing the right thing, but not in the right way. So this is the best bit of the story, because that's when I started working at Airbnb, obviously. So one of the most important tasks that the JSS still performed at this point was firewall key escrow. And we kept finding that the keys stored there weren't actually correct. We used as re-encrypting, where the key's not getting escrowed correctly, who knows? And there isn't really any easy way to pull out a list of people who actually access the keys, and there's no method to require approval for key access, so it's a bit of a security nightmare. So Crypt is an authorization plugin that will actually stop users from logging in if RVault's not enabled. It's really simple, and it's very straightforward to support. The web interface is also really simple. But we didn't take it for granted. We made sure it was fully documented. There's runbooks written for support. There was brown bag sessions. I hate that phrase, but it seems to be very common in this part of the world on how to use it. But this wasn't me being completely altruistic. I just didn't want to get woken up at 3 in the morning when I couldn't get a key out. So Munki, it's fantastic. So Munki can do most things. It's great at installing software, but it's not always the best tool for configuration management. And we found ourselves repeating ourselves a lot. A lot of the scripts we had to write for install checks and then to do the config change were very similar to each other, and it felt like busy work. Honestly, it was barely any better for config management than what we were using before. So we started rolling our config into Puppet. In a nutshell, Puppet works on the principle of desired state. You describe how you want your machines to look, and Puppet will make sure that they stay that way. It has its own domain-specific language, and that's the last time I'm going to say that, so now known as DSL. It's pretty simple to grok, even if you don't really understand what it's doing. Chef, the main alternative at the moment, is completely written in Ruby, which obviously has its advantages, but it's much harder for people that don't work with it every day to understand what's going on. Puppet's DSL makes it a lot easier for our help desk to see what we think the machine should look like. And Puppet has loads of things built in, so we could get up and running with it really quickly. It can insert one particular line into a file. Say you want to make sure that Flash updates are always turned on. Or it can manage a whole file of the template. Useful for when you want to, say, generate a configuration profile, let's say. And it knows about launch daemons out of the box, so it can describe what state we want our servers to be in. But Puppet is mostly used for managing Linux servers. There are several large organizations using Puppet to manage macOS, but they've not really shared much back to the community, so it meant we needed to build a few things out. For example, Puppet is perfectly capable of installing Apple packages out of the box, but we needed more functionality from it. So this is a typing provider that I wrote, which gives us some of that functionality back, which will check for the presence of files and their checksums. So rather than writing code which checked, say, is this file there every time, you could write that in Bash. It's easy, right? But you're writing that same code all the time. This allows us to abstract it away and put it into a DSL. So one of the best bits about Puppet, in my opinion, is Hira. Hira is how we can pass data into our Puppet code. So let's say you want a default value for all of your machines, but you have a couple of machines for which you want to use a different Munki client identifier. If your tool only manages whole files, you would need to import the profile twice. The majority of things in this profile are going to be identical across every single machine we have. The server, if we want to log to syslog, that kind of stuff. But we still have to duplicate it if we're using a tool which can only manage whole files. So that's clearly something that doesn't scale. So you move your config over to your config management tool, and well, okay, this is slightly better, but it still doesn't really scale when you have more than like 3 machines. So yeah, that's kind of it's better, but it's not great. So at the beginning of many Puppet modules, you'll see a series of options that have default values. This is our Munki module. Loads of options we can pass in there. We can inject those into our config profile. So how do we actually get our config assigned to machines? So the first piece is factor. Factor runs at the beginning of every Puppet run, and it collects little pieces of information, or facts, and that's as bad as the puns get with Puppet, fortunately, about the machine. Some of the built-in ones include how much memory the machine's got, what its IP address is, what's its serial number, that sort of thing. We can also deploy custom facts to tell us things that we want to know that no one else really cares about. Let's say, when did Munki last run successfully, or is the machine going through an imaging process? This allows us to tailor our code. If Munki hasn't run for a while, maybe we want to reinstall Munki and make sure all the services are loaded. If it's being imaged, we may not want to do some things to it. So this is the configuration for Hire itself. It lives on your Puppet servers. Here you'll see placeholders that correspond to facts. So when a machine checks in and sends all its facts up to the server will then go down this hierarchy and see if there's a value in there that matches what the client has returned to it. So let's say there's a machine with a serial number ABC123. It checks in, and in our serial number directory on the server, we have a file that matches its serial number. Hire will read in that file and get the value that we've specified. But we've only specified one value here, so there's a ton of others which you'll get from further down the hierarchy. So a bit further down, we have our Darwin.yaml. This will be applied to every Mac in our fleet. Hire is going to go down the hierarchy looking for values until it finds one. This allows us to set a general config for all of our machines and override where we need to. So if we were to write out the resulting YAML and it all got commented, this is what it would look like. The machine just gets the same bits of config as all the rest of our machines. But the piece we need to overwrite, we can. We could have just easily added in an additional class here to give this machine a different piece of configuration if we wanted to. And remember, these facts can be based on absolutely anything you can think of. Well, you have the ability to write in Ruby. So we assign a value to each machine from 1 to 100 based on its serial number. So then we have this fact called puts the machine into keyframe, grouping together all the machines, say, from 1 to 10, 10 to 20, so on and so forth. This allows us to test new versions of our configuration with a small number of people. We use the same principle with Munki, by the way, to shard out our software. This example allows us to deploy the beta version of Munki 3 to 10% of people without actually having to go through and specify each machine that we want to deploy to. So imaging. It's dead, right? Is it dead yet? Yes. Good, right, okay, so imaging's dead. It's going away. I've just cut out so much of my talk so we can get to lunch quicker. Yeah, what we do now is going to have to change, so there's no point in me telling you about what we do now. It's got about 2 months left to live. Okay, so at this point, we have our software bin management Munki, our config management Puppet, 5-volt keys safely escrowed away in Crypt, and currently imaged via Imager. We're nearly done. We can start thinking about turning off our JSS. But one of the things I didn't anticipate was how many random searches were being performed in our JSS. So I wrote Sal a few employers back, and it had widgets where you can display management-friendly dashboards, and managers love graphs, so that's all good. But its search capabilities were pretty lacking, in all honesty. So one of the benefits of open source is that you can change things to suit your organization. So even if I hadn't written Sal myself, we could have extended it to meet our needs. New search features were in production about 2 or 3 weeks after the need was identified. So even if your commercial vendor accepts your feature request, even just accepts it, acknowledges it exists, you actually have no guarantee when or even if it's actually going to be implemented. So this is amazing, right? We're in the land of milk and honey. We go home, we have a beer, we congratulate ourselves on being the best Mac admins on the planet. But there are a couple of things you should bear in mind. So one of the biggest misconceptions around open source, as Jamf Software helpfully points out for all of us, is open source isn't necessarily a cheap option. You know, there are costs to this stuff. If you are not paying for a company to support your tools, you're going to need to hire people to support these things. You need enough people to give you the level of coverage you feel comfortable with. You know, you need at least people who can get your Puppet server back up and running at 3 a.m. in the morning, otherwise you're getting paged for that. If you're a small organization who's mostly on one time zone, being a solitary admin might be fine for your company. If it's a large organization, you might want more availability around the world. The buck does stop with you. Not all organizations are going to be happy with that. Some organizations need someone to blame. Not all admins have enough confidence in their own ability to be it. They may want a support contract. That doesn't mean you can't get support for Puppet, you know, it's Puppet Enterprise. Plenty of consulting companies will support Munki for you if that's what you want. And no one's going to do this stuff for you. There's no jump starts for these things. You're doing it all on your own. You're going to need to put a lot of work into your training, documentation, and potentially building out integrations to get all these tools to talk to each other. Well, open source, you can audit the code yourself, right? You can see exactly what's running. That's useless if you don't understand what the code is doing. So when you move from having a GUI to everything, having a GUI for everything, to having your Macs configured purely with code, you're going to hear this basically every day from your help desk. It's a lot. I know, it's understandable, really, when you think about it. They used to do a lot of button clicking to assign config to their machines. I know it probably sounds silly to most people. When I heard this, I was like, why do you miss the old tool? It was terrible. But they saw it as we were taking away their tools. We were, as they saw it, getting them out of a job, potentially. We're mostly over this now. Now most of them have learned how to use Git. But if you are considering making a similar move away from these tools, away from commercial tools to open source, keeping your help desk on board is probably one of the hardest, but most important things you can do. They're the face of your IT organization. And if they hate your tool set, your users are probably going to hate it as well. So with our current tool set, we are clearly missing some things that we used to have. I've not spoken about MDM yet. So that means we currently do not have DEP. This used to be inconvenient. Now it's a real issue. So we actually need to think about this one now. It's not tomorrow's problem, it's now today's problem. So in many ways, imaging is a much better experience for our users. Okay, so, but I expect our support people are going to be really happy that they don't have to image anymore. So they win that one. We miss out on remote wipe via MDM, but we use Mac Destroyer from Google, so we get the same effect. And honestly, if someone's logging into an encrypted laptop, you're stuffed anyway. And we miss out on VPP and managed distribution. I don't care. There's nothing in the App Store really that I care about that I can't get from other places. It's not useful to us. We deploy very little software that's actually in the App Store anyway. All right, so it's not all doom and gloom. We got some good things out of this. We did this for a reason. Our clients are now actually configured based on their actual state, not the state that some random server thinks they're in or thought they were in last week. We can say with confidence what state our machines are in now. All of our code is deployed to the servers directly from Git. So we know exactly what code is running on our machines at any point. There's no copying and pasting into a web page here. There's no manual uploads. And most importantly, we've got a solution that's literally made for us. It matches our needs perfectly. That's not to say you can't augment the parts of your commercial tool that you don't like with open source. Let's say you think Jamf isn't very good at installing software. You could use Jamf for Munki, as Derek mentioned. So the job's not done yet. We want to build some more GUIs into this to help more of our support guys use our tools. We want to allow them to make safe choices when they're configuring machines. There are always going to be people on your help desk who are not comfortable using Git, editing text files, etc. I have in my speaker notes, we were looking at putting an MDM in. It's like, yeah, we are going to be putting an MDM in, obviously. Looking at both open source and commercial tools for this, because once again, open source can be expensive. Now, current MDM needs are pretty simple. So, does anyone have any questions? I think we have some time. None?
Questions? Questions for Graham?
Oh, hold on. Can I switch my next slide? Anyway, great.
I'd like to state that I do have a question. So how are you planning to fill the MDM gap? Are you planning on using a solution like micro MDM or contracting with someone like simple MDM? Or?
We're looking at all of it. Like I said, we like open source because we can make it do whatever we want to. But our timescales are quite short, and we would potentially need to hire someone who learns Go, say. It's a cost-benefit analysis. We're looking at everything, essentially.
Can you talk a little bit about your Puppet workflow when a new machine enrolls? What
Sure.
I mean by that, do you do like dynamic configuration on the server, or?
When a client enrolls, so we use Plan B, remediation tool from Google. Because obviously if the management tools aren't there, they're broken, so we need to fix them. And then the client will enroll in Puppet. Puppet server will check our inventory tool to see if it's one of our machines. If they are, they'll get their config, really. We only have one kind of machine, really, at a high level. We use Hira to classify nodes if they're going to be, say, going to a high-risk location, so we need to lock them down a bit more. Did I answer your question?
Sure. So like if you have two locations and a new map comes up, how do you know which location it's assigned to?
Location,
Repeat the question. Repeat.
Yeah, the question was if I have two nodes come up at different locations, how do I know which one they come from? We could use the things we know about the machine, like their external IP address, their internal IP address, but long answer short, we don't care. Unfortunately, you get an American computer no matter what keyboard is attached to it, and the user can switch that one out themselves.
Questions?
We have one down here.
Oh, no questions from that side.
So you said you're still looking at some solutions for MDM. The question that I have is, how do you sell it to the business, these open source solutions, when I feel like in a lot of times organizations, there'll only be one or two people. The reason people buy Casper is because it's popular, you can get training and so on and so forth, and it's not difficult to, just as an example, to pull a Casper person, out of thin air. But, you might have this like open source architect who built all of the infrastructure for the Macs, and the business is ready to make a decision, and you kind of have to sell it that you're not going to get hit by a bus or you're not going to leave. Like, how do you sell that?
Well, I hope I don't get hit by a bus. I'm not intending to. It's a tough one. It comes down to trust. Does your employer trust you? Do they trust that you can document this well enough? Like I said, you need coverage for this stuff. If you're on your own, then yeah, maybe a commercial tool will be better for you. If you're a large org, you can have 2 or 3 people who know all this stuff inside and out. There's costs associated with everything. I mean, you're paying what, $60 for Casper for the first year and then $20 a year after that? I mean, when you get over a certain fleet size, that's not cheap. I mean, that's easily 1 or 2 people.
Another question?
So you've talked a little bit about retooling the entire management architecture of your environment. What was your time scale and how many people are we talking about? Because I feel like that's a good question for a lot of us to think about is that, hey, I want to retool, I want to switch it up. How long did it take? What was your timeline like?
There are 2.5 people working on this stuff. The half. It's because you do security. I'm not being mean, okay? You do the real work, yeah. Well, it takes about 8 months, something like that. Yeah. To switching off of JSS, about 8 months, wasn't it? About that, yeah. About 8 months.
Any more questions for Graham Gilbert? Anyone but Alistair has a question? Alistair, do you have a question? No. Okay, thank you, Graham Gilbert.
Thank you, everyone. You can abuse me here. And one last thing, we are all Pan.